Some disagreements can be settled. Bring more evidence, check the sources again, clear up the misunderstanding, and the two sides slowly converge. But there's another kind of disagreement, and everyone has met it. Two serious people study the same events, read the same documents, and walk away holding opposite worlds. More evidence doesn't help because the further data, in all probability, will be read the exact way the present data are already being read. So the quarrel was never really about the evidence, it was about the two people quarreling. This is the conflict Bernard Lonergan takes up in Chapter 10 of Method in Theology. The last episode ended on exactly this handoff. History can uncover a conflict between two historians, but it cannot always resolve it. Because some conflicts do not come from the evidence at all. They come from the horizon each historian brought to the evidence before he began. And a horizon is not adjusted by simply more research. So history passes the conflict on to the fourth functional specialty, dialectic. Now, Lonergan opens with a warning, and the whole chapter rests on it. Not all opposition is dialectical. Some differences vanish the moment fresh data arrive. Some are merely perspectival, the honest differences between finite people looking at one enormous reality from different places. Those differences are not a problem, they enrich us. Dialectic is not about them. Dialectic is about the conflicts underneath. The ones that come from an implicit theory of knowledge, an ethical stance, a religious outlook. The ones that, he says, profoundly modify one's mentality, and those are overcome only through conversion. So, the chapter begins with the word that carries everything, horizon. In its literal sense, a horizon is the line where earth and sky appear to meet, the limit of what you can see from where you stand. Move, and the line moves with you. Now lift that fact out of geography. As your field of vision is bounded, so the scope of your knowledge and the range of your care also is bounded. What lies beyond your horizon you neither know nor want. What lies within it is, in some measure, an object of your interest and your knowledge. That is a horizon. Not a set of opinions you happen to hold, the frame that decides which opinions are even available to you. And here Lonergan draws the distinction that answers the question this episode inherited. Horizons can differ in three ways. They can differ as complements. Workers, foremen, engineers, doctors, lawyers, professors all live in different worlds, and each needs the other, and together they make one working world. Those differences enrich. Horizons can differ genetically. They are stages in one development, earlier and later in a single life or a single history, each later stage taking up the ones before and carrying them forward. Those differences enrich too. But horizons can also differ dialectically, and this one is different in kind. What in one is found intelligible, in another is unintelligible. What for one is true, for the other is false. For what one is good, for the other is evil. Here the two worlds do not add up. Each includes the other only by negating it, writing the other off as ignorance or illusion or bad faith or a refusal of grace. That is the difference that corrupts. And Lonergan gives it a face, you do not forget. Both astrology and genocide are beyond the pale, but the former is ridiculed, the latter is execrated. The other side is not merely mistaken, it is beyond the pale. So the real question turns concrete. Where do dialectically opposed horizons come from? And Lonergan's answer is the spine of the chapter. They come from conversion or from its abstinence. He borrows a distinction from Joseph de Finance. There is a horizontal exercise of freedom. The choices you make inside the horizon you already have. And there's a vertical exercise of freedom, the judgments and decisions by which you move from one horizon to another. Sometimes that move is gentle and deepening of what you already were, but sometimes it's an about face. It comes out of the old horizon by repudiating it, and it begins a new sequence that keeps opening greater depth and breadth and wealth. His formula here is plain. Such an about face and new beginning is what is meant by conversion, and there are 3 of them, each a different kind of event, each to be understood in itself before it is related to the others. The first is intellectual conversion, and it is the one almost everyone resists because it dismantles something that feels like common sense itself. Lonergan names the thing it destroys, a myth. The myth is that knowing is like looking, that objectivity is seeing what is there to be seen and not seeing what is not there, and that is the real. It is what is out there now to be looked at. That picture feels obvious, and it's false, because nearly everything you know, you never laid eyes on. You know it the way a whole community knows things, through experience organized by understanding and settled by judgment. Knowing, accordingly, is not just seeing. It is experiencing, understanding, judging, and believing. It is, in Lonergan's words, to acquire the mastery in one's own house that is to be had only when one knows precisely what one is doing, when one is knowing. And until you have it, only 3 positions seem possible. The naive realist who knows the real world but is sure he knows it by looking. Then we have the empiricist who trusts only the senses. The idealist who grants that knowing is more than sensing but keeps the empiricists real and so calls the known world merely ideal. Only the 4th holds that the world built by experience, understanding, and judgment is the real world. That is intellectual conversion, and nothing else in the chapter works without it. The second is moral conversion, and Lonergan states it in one line. Moral conversion changes the criterion of one's decisions and choices from satisfactions to values. As children, we are persuaded, coaxed, ordered, compelled to do what is right. Then comes the existential moment when you discover that your choosing makes you, that it is up to you to decide what you will make of yourself. Moral conversion is opting for the truly good, for value even against satisfaction when the two collide. But notice what it is not. It is not moral perfection. Deciding is one thing, doing is another. The convert still has to root out his bias, keep learning, keep listening to criticism, and to protest. Moral knowledge belongs only to morally good men, and until you have earned that name, you are still learning. The third is religious conversion. Religious conversion is being grasped by ultimate concern. It is otherworldly falling in love. It is total and permanent self-surrender without conditions, qualifications, reservations, and Lonergan is careful about its grammar. It is not first of all an act. It is a state, a dynamic state that is prior to and the principle of all the acts that follow. For the Christian, it is God's love flooding our hearts through the Holy Spirit given to us. Since Augustine, it has carried a name, operative grace. The replacement of the heart of stone by a heart of flesh. That is religious conversion. Now, Lonergan relates the 3. He says they are related by sublation, and he takes that word from Karl Rahner's sense, not Hegel's. To sublate is to go beyond something, to add something genuinely new, and yet to need it, include it, preserve it, and carry it forward. So moral conversion sublates intellectual and religious sublates moral. But watch the order. In the order of sublation, religious conversion comes last. In the order of causes, it comes first. And that reversal is one of the most important corrections in the whole book. First, there is God's gift of his love. Then the eye of that love reveals values in their splendor, and that is moral conversion. And only then, among the values it reveals, is the value of believing the truths handed on by the tradition. And there are the seeds of intellectual conversion. So the sequence you climb is not the sequence that moves you. Read it as a ladder you ascend by your own cleverness, and you have made religious conversion a reward for the philosophically gifted. That's exactly backward. But conversion has a shadow, and Lonergan refuses to look away from it. Besides conversions, there are breakdowns. What was built slowly by a person, a society, a culture, can come apart. And it comes apart in a particular way, not all at once. It begins with a small negation. Not all religion, but some, is called illusion. Not all morality, but some is dismissed as useless. Not all truth, but one kind of thinking, is written off as empty talk. Sometimes those negations are true, and they offset decline. But sometimes they are false, and then they begin it. A genuine part of the culture is cut away. The whole that remains is now mutilated, thrown off balance, distorting itself to compensate. The elimination, the mutilation, the distortion, all of it will be admired as a forward march of progress. Lonergan's line here discussing this is chilling. Once a process of dissolution has begun, it is screened by self-deception, and it is perpetuated by consistency. The body social is torn apart in many ways, and its cultural soul has been rendered incapable of reasonable convictions and responsible commitments. This is not a seminar problem. It is how a civilization dies from the inside. So, dialectic has real work. And Lonergan states it as two failures in the first three specialties. The first failure is that they stop at fact and say nothing of value. History told us what was going forward, and rightly, but it has nothing to say about history as concerned with values. Interpretation told us what a text meant, but there's also an interpretation that appreciates, that weighs the good and the evil in what was meant. So dialectic's first task is to add the evaluation the others left out. An interpretation that appreciates, a history that discerns good and evil. And research both of those require. The second failure, though, runs deeper. The first three specialties promise clear results, only if everyone worked from the same standpoint. But standpoints differ. And some differ grossly because the workers hold opposed horizons. And here Lonergan says the sentence this whole phase has been moving toward. The cause of the gross differences is a gross difference of horizon, and the proportionate remedy is nothing less than a conversion, which is why the first phase by itself is not enough. Research, interpretation, history, all of them approach the past. They do not encounter it. An encounter is the word Lonergan reaches for. Encounter is more. It is meeting persons, appreciating the values they represent, criticizing their defects, and allowing one's living to be challenged at its very roots by their words and by their deeds. Because encounter is the one way in which self-understanding and horizon can be put to the test. So, let's give the problem in full. The three conversions can each be present or absent. Do the arithmetic. That yields 8 radically different types of horizon. Their results are a Babel. Every investigation runs from within some horizon. That stays true, Lonergan says, even if one assumes that one makes no assumptions. The empty head is a fantasy here, exactly as it was in history. Natural science mostly escapes the Babel because it holds itself to what observation and experiment can settle. Mostly, but not entirely, because the moment a physicist tells you what his physics means, he has smuggled in a philosophy. And the human sciences do not escape at all. Treat a man as a robot or a rat, and your results hold only so far as a man is a robot or a rat, which is grotesquely little. So a theology can be methodical only if these issues are met head on. So, how does dialectic meet them? Not with an argument that settles the quarrel. No argument can, because the parties do not even share the terms an argument would be built from. An idealist never means what an empiricist means, and a realist never means what either of them means. Dialectic does something else. It makes the horizons visible, and it works on two levels. On the lower level, the materials are prepared. You assemble the research, the interpretations, the histories, and the events they are about. You complete them, adding the evaluations that were missing. History in the style of Burkhardt rather than a Ranke. You compare, reduce the many disputes to their few real roots, classify which roots are horizon conflicts, and select only those. On the upper level, two commands: develop positions, reverse counterpositions. And those two terms are the hinge of the entire method. A position is a statement that can live with intellectual, moral, or religious conversion. You develop it by carrying it further. A counterposition is a statement that cannot. You reverse it by removing the part that conflicts. So notice two things. A counterposition is not burned. No. It is reversed, purged, not destroyed. And a counterposition is a statement, never a person. You are sorting claims, not condemning souls. And now comes the move that makes dialectic a method, and it is one of the most ingenious in the whole book. Watch what happens when different people run the same procedure. A person who has undergone all three conversions will sort the positions and counterpositions accurately, develop the real positions, reverse the real counterpositions, and he produces an idealized version of the past, something better than what was the reality. A person who has not undergone one of them will get that very area backward. He will mistake counterpositions for positions and positions for counterpositions. He will develop what should have been reversed, and his result presents the past as worse than it really was. So the divergence is not noise, the divergence is the evidence. Each investigator, by what he develops and what he reverses, reveals the self that did the work. He reveals the selves that did the research, offered the interpretation, studied the history, passed the judgments of value. Such an objectification of subjectivity is the style of the crucial experiment. The horizons that could never be argued about now lie in the open, where they can be seen and weighed. It will not be automatically efficacious, but it will make conversion a topic and thereby promote it. Because conversion, Lonergan says, is not sudden. It is a slow process of maturation, finding out for oneself and in oneself what it is to be intelligent, to be reasonable, to be responsible, to love. And this is the whole temper of the specialty. The converted investigator finds what was true and good even in his opponents, and what was mistaken and evil even in his allies. Authenticity is never a possession. It is a withdrawal from unauthenticity, and the withdrawal is never a permanent achievement. Now, there is one more thing dialectic has to do, and it is unusual. It has to answer the philosophies that say it cannot exist. Because opposed horizons do not just quarrel. With a little sophistication, they grow into rival methods, each claiming Lonergan's whole approach is wrong-headed. And here his strategy is worth marking because it sets the tone of the specialty. His aim is not to prove his own position, not to refute counterpositions, but to exhibit diversity and to point to the evidence for its roots. Dialectic does not win the argument, it shows where the arguments come from. He answers two objections. The first, from linguistic analysis, says meaning is public, carried by ordinary language. So talk of private mental acts is a mistake. Lonergan grants the public part, then answers that any language coming to be begins in expressed mental acts and a new word or usage that one person expressed and others slowly caught. So meaning does rest on mental acts, exactly where the objection said it could not. The second is the idealist objection, that self-appropriation clarifies the subject but never reaches objective knowledge. And the answer turns on a single distinction Lonergan has been saving. There are two meanings of the word object. In the world of immediacy, the object is already out there, now, real. And the test of objectivity is to be a successfully functioning animal. In the world mediated by meaning, the object is what your questions intend and your judgments affirm. Confuse the two and every modern philosophy ties itself in a knot. Berkeley, Hume, Kant, Hegel, each in his own way. Separate them, and the knot comes undone. And out of it comes one of the most quoted sentences in the whole book. Objectivity is simply the consequence of authentic subjectivity, of genuine attention, genuine intelligence, genuine reasonableness, genuine responsibility. That is not relativism, it's the opposite of relativism. Be attentive, be intelligent, be reasonable, be responsible. Do that, and objectivity follows. Now, Lonergan closes with a quiet note that points beyond the chapter. Transcendence, he says, is not only the summit of the other realms of meaning, it can become a realm of its own, the gift of God's love, cultivated by prayer and self-denial, withdrawing a person into what the mystics called a cloud of unknowing. But it is a reminder that the horizon dialectic lays bare are finally about God. So, let me draw the whole chapter together. The question this episode inherited was how to drag buried conflicts into the open. How to tell the differences that enrich us from the ones that corrupt us. Lonergan answered both. The differences that enrich are complementary and genetic and perspectival, and dialectic leaves them alone. The differences that corrupt come from opposed horizons, and opposed horizons come from the presence or absence of conversion. Dialectic drags them into the open by a procedure as exact as a crucial experiment. Develop positions, reverse counterpositions, and let the divergence reveal the men. That completes the first phase of theology. Research gathered the data, interpretation found the meaning, history reconstructed the movement, and dialectic turned all of it into encounter. But notice still what dialectic has not done. It has laid every horizon on the table. It objectifies the options. It does not take sides. And a theology cannot stay there forever, faithfully reporting everyone's convictions and stating none of its own. Sooner or later, the indirect discourse has to become direct. Someone has to stop describing what others hold and say what is so. In the next episode, we move to foundations, because once dialectic has spread every possible horizon before us and shown that the choice among them is conversion, the next question can no longer be deferred. On what ground does a theologian finally take his stand and make the horizon he lives in his own?